Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory podcast. Today, I am coming back with a big case of Ted Bundy, which has been requested over and over since I started the YouTube channel and sharing the podcast on YouTube as well. Now, before I get into the case, I want to say a few things. Number one, most of you know that I moved to the middle of nowhere. I live in a yurt as we're building our house, developing our property. And so there might be noises coming from outside. It's completely silent 23 hours a day, but sometimes they're shooting or somebody's draining their pond, and since it's so quiet and we're in the woods, it's very echoey. It's also super hot, and so my computer is the background noise that you can hear. She's struggling to stay cool. She gets a little overheated with high temperatures. So, other than that, I want to say thank you to everyone that stayed while I took my little hiatus. I mentioned why on my community tab on YouTube, the Mystery Theory. And so, I want to say thank you to everyone that has been requesting and telling me how the podcast has been helping them throughout this time. You know, the virus, everything really, social distancing, and that there was one in particular, should have written down the name. It's telling me how, as I think it was a guy. Hope you're listening to this and you're not getting offended, but was walking the dog and listening to podcast to kind of quote unquote deal with our current situation. So thank you for everyone that continue to listen to this podcast and that really stayed. I appreciate it. I am working really hard to produce quality content, research cases, and put a little spin, mystery theory style. For those of you that are on Patreon, I'm going to have the link down below to a new case that I released there about Beatriz Mota. For those of you who don't know, she is the John Benet Ramsey case of Brazil. It's an unsolved mystery. I took my time to research it, try to get a timeline straight, as straight as you can get it in a horrible investigation that again reminds me of the John Benet Ramsey case, and kind of a spin because this was happened in South America, so with different kind of resources and just overall a different kind of case. If you want to support my channel or the podcast, you can check out my page, The Mystery Theory, on Patreon. And if you are a patron already, that's available. Everyone that's there has access to it. I really wanted to work in uploading quality content for everyone that stayed. So, thank you so much again for being here. And for everyone else, new people that are joining, welcome. I hope you stay. Now let's talk about our guy, Ted. Ted Bundy has one of those infamous reputations that you get kind of confused by it, or at least I do anyways. I can't believe I haven't shared this case before, but as a comeback, I thought, why not? Most people know about Ted Bundy, but for some reason, I got a lot of requests to cover this case. As always, let's start from the beginning, which is pretty twisted if you ask me. So, there we go. Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell, which, by the way, sounds like a very serious name. Then when you hear people refer to him as Teddy, kind of messed up that idea. But the guy was born in Burlington, Vermont, on November 24th, 1946. That's my husband's birthday, so it kind of bothers me all the time when I read about his date of birth. His mom was Eleanor Louise Cowell, and you probably know her as Louise. And she was a young mother, but not the youngest either, in my opinion. And back in the day, people would have children at a very young age. I mean, 13, 14, right? Maybe that was before 1946, but she was still young. She was in her 20s, and her pregnancy, I am not sure if it was something that the parents wanted to hide, and they sent her to this Elizabeth's Lund home for unwed mothers. I know that Ted was born there, but I don't know how long she stayed there. So, did she take a few months before? Did she actually disappear? I'm assuming that she spent some time there, or that they were trying to hide her pregnancy. But to make things a little bit weirder, I feel like everything that I have in my notes, it's weird at this point, but when the time came when she had to list Ted's father, she initially wrote Lloyd Marshall. Now, this guy apparently had a fling with her, according to Louise. He was a Penn State graduate and an Air Force veteran. That was that. Then she kind of changed her mind and decided to list the father as Jack Worthington, which is, or was, a sailor that got her pregnant while in Philly. Could have been, who knows. But there is also this theory by Anne Rule, that she speculated in her book that Ted was actually his grandpa's son. Yeah, it's all kind of messed up. Louise's dad, Samuel Cowell, was supposedly Ted's dad. Now, the thing that made me believe that they were hiding this pregnancy is because Louise's parents decided to raise Ted as their own child instead of admitting that Louise got pregnant in her 20s, which I had my fourth child when I was, I think, 23. I don't think it's out of the ordinary to be pregnant, but maybe Louise not being married and them being part of a church had something to do with the hiding of this. Now, Anne, she speculated that it was actually kind of an incestuous relationship between Louise and her dad because Samuel, well, he was not the best guy in the world. They also speculate, and again, I couldn't confirm this, but I read that Louise did want to put him up for adoption, but that her parents stopped her from doing it and actually decided to keep it as their own. Let's talk about Grandpa Samuel. Grandpa / dad. Ugh. The now dad, but originally Grandpa. Follow me please for a second. He apparently liked to mess with the cats in the neighborhood. He had some kind of several actually accounts of seeing him grab cats by the tail and throwing them over the fence. There was also another instance that apparently he threw Ted's aunt down the stairs. Overall, if you haven't gotten it yet, he was an abusive and very violent man. And that is why I think that that theory of him impregnating his daughter kind of started that research because of his history as a violent man. As you can imagine, Ted loved Grandpa. I mean, he looked up to him. Not cute, I know. You shouldn't be violent and a horrible person ever, but especially in front of children. It was said, and again, this is something that I read as I was researching Anne's theory, that Samuel saw something of himself in little Ted. Who knows? He could have been a sick individual. I don't know, but they bonded. And Teddy was a little naughty from a young age. In one instance, his aunt, Julia, which I'm not sure if Julia was the one that Samuel threw down the stairs, or I'm not sure, but if she was, I mean, bless her heart. There was this instance when she was sleeping and woke up to see little Ted. I think he was 3 years old, okay? So picture yourself sleeping somewhere and waking up to find little Ted at the foot of the bed smiling. If that's not creepy enough, she checked under the covers to realize that she had 3 knives kind of pointing at her. I know, apparently Grandpa / Dad Samuel and little Teddy were very much alike. Now, I'm not sure if Louise was very fond of the relationship or if there is more that we don't know that Teddy was doing at the time. And we're talking under the age of 5. So, but she decided, I'm out of here. I am going to take Teddy with me and I'm going to move to Tacoma, Washington. Now, Louise was young again and she was looking for love. And she found it in Johnny Clopper Bundy. Of course, somebody needs to text me now. And this happened they met at this church event. Now, they fell in love, they got married, and Ted became Theodore Robert Bundy. He was only 5 years old at the time. It was said that Johnny tried to bond with his new little son, but it was impossible. According to Johnny, he was not interested. He didn't want to do your typical father-son kind of thing. He didn't want to play ball. He didn't want to go fishing. He didn't want to bond in any typical way. Later on, we learn that even though he was super young, Teddy, as they were calling him, he came up with weird sickness, or like he was feeling sick, so he didn't have to go bond or spend time with Johnny. Now, he thought that he deserved much better. Later on, we learn that he was not satisfied with the dad that he got now. Apparently, he later on said that he deserved a better life, that he should have been living in another family, or maybe a little bit more rich, or with more money than Johnny could provide. But Ted grew up a lonely boy. I mean, there was this article that I read that kind of emphasized something was not right in him. He said that he used to love to listen to talk radio shows, which was not uncommon at the time with the TV or the internet of nowadays. But he would listen to these programs as a very young boy. And later on, he confessed that he loved to listen to those shows because he felt like he was eavesdropping. So, listening to a conversation he shouldn't be. He also, and this is this is the record, and I am not going to go into what children should be watching or not, if it messes you up or if it doesn't, but it is on record that Ted spent a lot of time watching porn. And even this happened even before he moved to Washington, which means that he was younger than 5 years old. Now, you're probably wondering how? How a young boy with no internet, with maybe not TV, how? Well, his grandpa had a big collection of magazines in the shed, and he found them. He spent hours looking through them. He said it himself, okay, that seeing that at that young age broke something inside of him. I don't know if he was fishing for sympathy or empathy, or if he truly believed that. I mean, he was a super smart guy who later on will learn that he did have a background in psychology, so it could be him analyzing himself. Now, as a teenager, things were getting worse. He was a pathological liar, a shoplifter, and he got arrested. I'm not sure if he was charged, but I know that he was arrested for theft and burglary. Now you're probably wondering, so if he thinks that he deserves much better, if he should have more money, is he stealing gold, jewelry, porn? No, he was stealing mostly ski equipment. How can a poor kid afford to go skiing? Well, you don't. You can't. It is not something that people that are in his position would do or would be able to afford. But in his head, he deserved a better life, better things, and again, he was only taking what he deserved, or so he thought. Now, since he was such a smart guy, because to be honest, when I hear a teenager saying that they deserve much better, that they should have this and they should have that, and that, you know, a little entitled, I always think to myself, you better go to school, you better become a successful fill in the blank, because if you want all that, you have to work for it, right? So, in Ted's case, since he was such a smart guy and he deserved so much better, he decided to go to University of Washington. Now, his goals were a little bit twisted. He wanted to learn Chinese because, number one, that will lead him to powerful people, because he believed that the Chinese were going to take over the world. Maybe he was right there. I mean, I'm not judging that part. I just find it interesting that he wanted to go to school to learn Chinese. And he also was very interested in skiing. So he ended up taking ski trips to the mountains where he met Stephanie Brooks. Most of you know about Stephanie. She was a girl that was not only a beautiful brunette, rich, and coming from a stable family, but she also, like Ted, enjoyed going skiing quite often, and Ted would catch a ride with her to the mountains. Stephanie, I mean, she was a smart girl too, so she knew that Ted was not husband material, but she still liked to have fun with him. Now, at that time, Ted, in order to be able to afford things, he had to work. So he liked to work in places where he could meet rich people. Like, there was this place that he works as a, I'm not sure his position in particular, but it was like a yacht club. And he would use his position there to steal from customers, and most of the time get away with it. He got so good at it that he was making a lot of money, not from his employment, but from being good at stealing things. So I'm thinking that one day he was drinking a beer and he thought to himself, I'm a psychopath, good at lying. Why don't I go into politics? Just kidding. Probably didn't happen like that. I'm sure he didn't say that. But he decided to go into politics, and he was a proud Republican. Now, again, his true intentions are to be closer to people in a place of power. So, yeah, maybe being surrounded by politicians is going to give him the status that he was looking for, right? In 1968, when he was only 22 years old, he was appointed both the Seattle chairman and the assistant state chairman of the new majority for Rockefeller. He was also going to that year's Republican convention in Miami, but sadly for Ted, this was another unsuccessful endeavor. He just hated when they lost to Nixon, so he was truly devastated by it. To make things worse, Stephanie at that time got tired of his lies and decided to end their relationship. So he decided to drop out of the University of Washington and get a job as a security guard and driver for another politician, Art Fletcher, who, by the way, got nowhere. So it wasn't like, this guy got somewhere and suddenly Ted was surrounded by the most powerful people in the world. Yeah, not really. So another defeat for him. And again, this is coming from his mouth. Most of this stuff and confessions and things he said, he's almost like trying to give you the idea of, and then I was heartbroken, and then I felt defeated, and then that was a no-go. And it's almost like he's keeping a tab on things that went wrong for him. I don't know if he's looking to, maybe make you feel bad for him, excuse his behavior, but it's almost like somebody's telling you a story. But please remember that broke my heart, that broke my spirit. And guess what? It happens to everyone. We all get heartbroken every once in a while, and we don't go around doing what Ted Bundy did. But I can see the pattern, and every time I was listening to something different or reading one of his letters, one of his confessions, it was almost like, and then this happened, and almost like grab a tissue and cry with the guy because this was the end of the world. And it wasn't. So after that, he was sad, got nowhere, so he had to move. After another defeat. So he went back to Philly, and then he went to Vermont. that is where allegedly he found out that his parents were not his parents and that his sister was actually his mom. Okay, that's kind of messed up. Listen, Louise took him when he was a 5-year-old boy, so I assumed that he knew. And some say that, that he already knew about this and that he just played the poor me card when officially was confirmed by his grandparents, but that he made a point to make sure that broke his soul. Some other people say he was a great actor because he called Louise mom, so what? I don't know. Now, when he was staying in Philly, he became a good student, a straight A student. He put aside his need for dominating the world and kind of surround himself with Chinese people that were going to take over the world. And he decided to go back to Washington now that he had better grades. It's like, I'm going to go to the University of Washington and I'm going to get my major in psychology. That's what he wanted to do. Now, then some people were like, well, he was trying to do better because he became a suicide hotline volunteer where he spent 12 hours a day for an entire summer and getting these calls. He was with a former police officer, Anne Rule. I mentioned her already, who later wrote the book, The Stranger Beside Me. This was something that a lot of people praised and got confused about him, but this volunteer thing was something that he needed to do for school. So no, he didn't choose to do this from the kindness of his heart. He was like, how can I give back to my community or anything like that? No, this was part of what he was studying, and whoever does it, whoever is good at it, and according to Anne, he was very patient, and he was very he showed empathy. He seemed like a really nice guy. So for whatever reason that he did it, he did a good job. So that was good, right? But now is where his true intentions come to life because, oh no, Elizabeth, there we go again. By September of 1969, he had met a young mother by the name Elizabeth Clopper. I always say it wrong. Clopper. Let's talk about Elizabeth. She was not only his girlfriend, but she's also very well known for staying with him for way too long. She loved him dearly, maybe a bit too much. And he convinced her that no matter what he did, so no matter how evil he is or was, should say, she was lucky to have him. I mean, how did he do that? I have no idea. But it was pretty... it was a pretty sick relationship, if you ask me. And I'll tell you a little bit more in the end. But what happened is that he wanted... His whole strategy was, coming back to Washington, kind of moving on with his life, getting a major in psychology. But the motive behind it is that he wanted to to break Stephanie's heart. Remember cute Stephanie? The girl that would give him rides to the mountains, who decided that he was not good enough for a husband, that she was coming from a rich family. Well, now by this time, Ted got his degree in psychology, and he was pretty successful in politics too. And some say that his life was 100% different and better compared to the Ted that Stephanie met some time ago. So when she heard about him not only being successful but also what they believe was a changed man, she got interested. So they got together. They even talk about getting married. But then after enrolling her into that fantasy of, well, we're a couple, we're both successful, we love each other. Keep in mind, he was with Elizabeth too. Even though they were together and then they were separated and they were together. But listen, when it came to Stephanie, he decided that after trying this relationship and making her believe that they were going to get married, he broke her heart. This is what he came back to Washington to do. He wanted to use his success to get her back and then hurt her. So Stephanie, being the smart girl that she was, she realized that wasn't a healthy relationship, and even being heartbroken, she decided to end things with Ted. Smart girl, can't say it enough. I think that, he was very manipulative and he had his ways around women. So I bet that it was hard for Stephanie to actually end this relationship, but good for her. I think that she really got out of what could have been a terrible situation for her. Now, some other theories say that he ended the relationship. Regardless, she really got out in time. Now, the aftermath of a broken heart. Really, Ted that same month decided to follow girls from bars to their homes. He was heartbroken by what happened with her. Stephanie, I mean. And he was kind of being a weirdo and trying to find girls that were brunettes, pretty, maybe resembles any kind of resemblance to the love of his life, Stephanie. No, he also, because he was heartbroken. Are you keeping tabs? Heartbroken? Just, it's a pattern here, remember? Okay. So he also began drinking, heavily drinking at this time. He later on said that he felt free when he was drunk and that he could act in ways that maybe he wouldn't do it otherwise. So he decided to give it a go. And on December 1973, he got drunk in this bar and decided to follow this girl home. He, for some weird reason, knew where she was going. I'm assuming that he either knew her before or there was maybe just a one apartment complex. For some weird reason, he knew the direction that she was going. So he took a shortcut and got ahead of her. Then he grabbed a piece of wood that was laying by the dumpster and waited for her. I mean, she was the second Stephanie in this story because she turned left right before getting close to the dumpster where Ted was waiting for her. So she 100% avoided the encounter. Now, you think maybe he was like, oh my goodness, I was drunk. I can't believe I was gonna do that. I'm a terrible person. Why did I think of that? I mean, I have, psychology background. Let me analyze my... No. That's not Teddy. He instead of feeling bad, he felt excited for that previous night. So he decided to go out again to try to find another girl. So here we go again. He continued to try, and 3 days later, he spotted a woman trying to open her car. He came from the back with a piece of wood, hit her in the head. She fell to the ground, but she was still conscious. So she started screaming, and Ted had no other option but to run. Now, this is the time when he realized that finding people that resemble Stephanie was kind of hard. I mean, there were a bunch of girls in bars, but the ones that he thought that looked like Stephanie, they really were not easily or readily available. So he decided to go to any girl, really. He was desperate and he needed a victim. But why? Let's talk about that. Okay, he felt the need to find a victim. But why? Well, later on he will explain it. So let me catch you up with that. He said that he was trying to cover for this entity. Well, if you're not sure about this entity, apparently lived inside of him. And this entity had him looking for a victim. Okay, so that's all. This entity was like, I'm looking for this or that. While, in the meantime, his rational self was trying to battle this need of finding a new victim. He also later on said that the entity didn't commit the murders. So what does the entity have to do with the whole thing? Well, apparently Ted was committing the murders, that the entity was only responsible for the actual attacks. But then he decided to kill girls, or he wanted to kill girls just to cover it up and not get caught. So the base of the story, I guess, is the entity made him find girls to abuse, but then Ted was the one that actually killed them so they wouldn't recognize him and he wouldn't go to jail. You get me now? Yeah, very, very twisted. So let's talk about the first thrill for Ted. He kind of changed tactics and he decided to go window peeping, right? If that's not, creepy enough. He spotted his first victim, Karen, who was living in a basement apartment near his law school. Okay, so he snuck into her room while she was sleeping. Okay, that's terrible. Sorry. He twisted a metal bar from her bed frame and beat her unconscious. It gets worse. And then he assaulted her with the same metal bar. and sexually assaulted her, of course. Karen was later on found by her roommate the next morning. She survived, but she ended up with brain damage. Then it was Linda and Healy. He stalked this girl for weeks. I mean, he finally, on January 31st, 1974, broke into her room, knocked her unconscious, wrapped her in a sheet, and carried her to his car. Okay, that's him being comfortable with this whole idea or the entity. He took her to a spot where he used to go with Stephanie in the mountains, and I'm assuming this is a remote area, not where they used to hang out, but something nearby, maybe someplace that he explored before. So then, there, he raped her and strangled her. And he said that woke something inside of him. I mean, he started killing. And he continued for months, really. 2 months after Linda, he found Donna Manson. Then he found Susan Rancourt. She was the one that was killed while doing a load of laundry. Yeah, I know. You don't have to tell me about it. I know. And again, he would do these trips to the mountains with Ted. He was not as careful as he thought, though. The girls initially were reported as missing, of course. And eventually, a few people reported to the police that there was hands. I mean, this is, when I read it, I was like, goodness gracious. We've been a shallow society for as long as I continue to read into our history. I mean, it was reported that a handsome guy was approaching girls in the streets and was driving a VW Beetle. Oh, just like Ted's. And then different reports of girls that said that they met this guy. That he asked them to help him carry something, some instances or some books. And he pretended to be injured and needing help. Now, I don't know if girls felt flattered by this quote-unquote handsome guy needing help. Maybe they thought that he was hitting on them. I don't know. But if you need help carrying something, is it a girl the first thing? Not because they're not strong enough. Do not get me started on that. But all I'm saying is it's weird. I mean, it was for his own benefit that he picked girls. But it is also very weird that they accepted. Maybe they felt comfortable because he looked like, smart, handsome guy. Oh, I have to say it again. So, I don't know. But in one particular occasion, this girl tried to help him. But then when she got close to his car, she realized that he got his front seat removed. I mean, I would have been scared too. Wouldn't have carried his book in the first place, but let's say that I got close enough to see that, I would run. And that's exactly what she did. Things were getting worse, really. They were getting brutal. And so that's when we go into Brenda Ball. Brenda was hitchhiking and Ted was driving by. So instead of giving her a ride to whatever she was going, they decided to spend time together. They had sex. And of course, this is coming from Ted Bundy. Okay? Maybe he raped her. Who knows? According to him, they had a good time. But then he decided to kill her and had sex with her corpse. So, Ted, we're catching up to you, brother. This does not add up. So if the entities wanted to have sex with these girls, why the heck did he kill her if it was something that they both wanted to do? So he either thought that he was the king of cuteness and nobody would say no to him, or he lied. Because remember, he said that he was killing to cover up the raping and the rest of the stuff he was doing with his girls. But this is another kind of sickness. I mean, he kept her in his closet. I'm talking about her corpse, okay? It stinks. And he basically would use her as a doll, if you know what I mean, when needed. When she started to smell too much, he took her to this particular spot in the mountains to get rid of her body. Okay, again, this would later come out of Ted. So how much can we believe the guy? I'm really not sure, but you think that a body inside a closet in a regular apartment or house would really start to stink. And he didn't, well, I don't know. Listen, to tell lies, it is so hard to be a good liar. And even for, psychopaths and sociopaths. And I'm like, keep your lies straight. If you have an entity that is telling you to do something and you're covering up for the entities, then just don't say that the girl had sex with you because she wanted to. A little bit egocentric, if you ask me, but egocentric. But in that same, and let me make a little comment here. In the same confession, I guess, or when he was talking about this, he would also talk about some of his victims. This just was one of them, but he also said that he started killing from a very young age, and that he started near his home. Basically, there was a young girl that disappeared from his neighborhood when he was a newspaper delivery kid in the area. And this girl's name is Anne Marie Burr. She disappeared. I think she was 7. Don't quote me on that, but she was very, very young. She disappeared. And when they were trying to get it out of Ted and say, hey, did you kill her? What did you do with her body? He kind of took a turn and he started talking a third person like he did it. Like it wasn't himself. Like he wasn't referring to an entity, but it was more talking about this. Like he was Paul and he was talking about what Ted did, that kind of thing, which is something typical for a psychopath. It's something that they do, so it shouldn't be surprising. But he did confess to taking this girl, but basically he made it seem like he was another person. Well, very twisted. He never mentioned her name though. He just said everything that happened in a third person, and yeah, pretty crazy if you ask me. And let's talk about Georgian Hawkins. This is the last one that I will mention in today's part 1. and then I'll come back with part 2. It should be available immediately for you to listen as a podcast, and also will be available in video on YouTube. Now, let me finish with this girl, because after Brenda, this girl, Georgian Hawkins, was and I'm probably butchering because, again, I haven't watched a video about this. I only read from sources, from credible sources, official sources about this story. So I haven't heard people tell me the story, so I'm probably butchering some of the names. Excuse me for that. But she was a student at the University of Washington too, and she disappeared in a very odd way. It was like, you know, those cases that I've covered before, the 411 cases, that for those of you who are still waiting, there will be new episodes, but you know how they vanish? And some of them, they show up like in the top of the mountain. They were not wearing shoes. They couldn't have gotten up there by themselves, you know. Well, her case, it was almost like that. She was visiting her boyfriend in his fraternity's house and left to go to her sorority house. Now you're thinking, well, it's not that weird. Well, they were 90 feet away from each other, and they were connected by an alleyway. She was also last seen by a couple of witnesses 40 feet away from the house, so she made it almost halfway to the house. Her body was never found, though, but the theory is that he heard about her. Something about George. Like, people would call her George. So authorities believe that he called her by her name and then hit her in the head, killing her instantly. I don't know if they believe that it was because it was kind of a different kind of name, that she'd be curious to know, you know, was calling her by her first name, or if it was that, you know, he pretended to be somebody that she knew, or he wanted her to perceive him as somebody that maybe knew her or knew about her. Again, a completely different scenario and victim compared to the ones that we've covered this far. Now, this was, you know, a time of panic, and I do know people that, you know, had to live through this time in Washington. I know one lady in particular that had to live through this time in the Seattle area, and she mentioned to me, I mean, this was like, okay, once we learned that this was happening to young girls, the whole city was in high alert. I mean, girls were not going to follow an injured guy needing help. They were not going to be alone at night. They avoid alleyways and so on. Everyone was in high alert, and the media actually made a point to inform girls, people in general, to take precautions, because there was this guy on the loose who was not afraid of leaving witnesses behind. Like all those girls that either ran from him, got away from him, were hit by him, and then survived, but yet there's no like sketch or something at this point. There's nothing official enough to be able to recognize this guy. So I'm going to leave you with the panic in the Seattle area among girls and parents and normal people. I mean, this was a time of a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity, a lot of questioning if, you know, the guy that is beside you is not that guy. It is so crazy to me that he continued to use the same car, that he used his personal car to commit all this. Kind of shows you how things work back in the day, because right now they gotta get smart, because otherwise they're not gonna be able to pull it off more than once or twice. And we see new cases that, they have to really think these things through. However, for whatever reason, and I'll tell you why in part 2, but there's a lot of things that piss me off really in this case, and we'll come back to the shallow part of our society and our world and people in general. And it really was one of the worst times in the area, and especially for girls who didn't feel safe. So come back for part 2, where I'm going to go through his new strategy. Because, listen, when you really want to do something, you will find a way. You will find an opportunity, a window of opportunity. You will find somebody, you will find something that will help you achieve whatever you want to achieve. So that's what I'm going to share with you in the next episode. I'm going to tell you about his new strategy, and we will finish this case in part 2. I'll tell you how things developed, and then I'll do my little closing in the end and tell you a few other aspects and things that I think are worth mentioning in this case. The other day I read a comment about it, and again, this comes up very, very often. Am I speaking English? But there was this comment that was saying, well, too much personal information, too much of your thoughts, too much of this, too much of that. And guys, I totally get it. This is my style. This is what I do. This is what I like to share. I kind of like to share with you what I would share with a friend if we were sitting and talking about something like this. And yes, I do have that conversation with my friends. So for me, it's a little bit of both. Let me tell you the story, but also let me put it in a way that it's more relatable. Gosh, I hate that word when we're talking about serial killers. I hate relate. Well, you cannot relate to people that commit those horrible crimes. But what I'm saying is relate to the situation, relate to the victim, relate to the time, relate to society at the time, relate to a small town or a big town, or that's the kind of thing I like to do here in the mystery theory. And if that's not your cup of tea, if you absolutely hate it, feel free to just Google his name, or Google or YouTube his name, and I can assure you that there will be hundreds of videos about him, and with really keeping, gosh, that dog needs to bark, right? He's like an inch bigger than a chihuahua, and he barks from 2 acres away, and I can hear it here. All right. Anyways, I thought I needed to add that to the end of the video, because I read you guys. I totally get it if you don't enjoy this kind of content, and if you think that is too much information, or if you can't really relate to the things I try to relate to the story. I totally get it. You don't have to. You don't have to listen to the podcast. It's fine. We can still be friends. There's an X on the top of your screen. You can X me out and find somebody that is only going to give you the facts. But to be honest, the mystery theory, it's about theories. It's about using my brain to come up with my own theories. It's about using our brains as, this true crime community to kind of understand things from a different perspective and to share this kind of cases. Now, I like to share cases where people are not found, unsolved mysteries and stuff like that, in the hopes of finding them or finding closure for the families. And this kind of serial killers, I like to share them as our lesson. What can we learn from this? What can we use as information, as data, to help us do better? How can we understand a very sick mind? How can we do better in the future? How can we help people with this kind of mental health issues to avoid them going in this direction? That's what I want to do with this series of serial killers. So yes, you will get my opinion, and yes, you're gonna get my snarky comments, and you're picturing me rolling my eyes. Yes, I know you are. So thank you for being here at the Mystery Theory podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you enjoy this content and you'd like to leave me feedback, please make sure that you rate the podcast. That helps it go up a little. It's been going down because of the lack of content, which is 100% my fault. But if you feel like you'd like to leave a review, I'd love for you to do that, and it really does help a lot. So if you're on YouTube, make sure you leave a comment down below. Let me know about my commentary. Let me know what you think. And again, no hard feelings. We can all enjoy it. We can all hate it together. It's just life. Talk to you in part 2 for the Ted Bundy serial killer series.